Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all 389 Bach chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Ach wie nichtig, Ach wie flüchtig, which translates to how insubstantial, how fleeting. This is a really cool chorale. Pretty much everything functions the way that it's supposed to, but there are some interesting relationships between the phrases, and that has an impact on the form. All in all, it's a delightful chorale to analyze, and we should probably just hop right into the analysis. So no key signature. Our first chord is A minor. Our last chord is A major. I reckon we're in the key of A minor. We're just going to start off with that one chord. Our first cadence is actually an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor because we have C in the melody. So then we have G sharp, B, E, and B. That's an E major triad over G sharp. And then we have another A minor triad in root position. And then the only thing that changes from this beat to the next beat is the bass leaping down an octave. In the next phrase, we have another imperfect authentic cadence, but this time in the key of C major. So what we can say is that this A minor is now 6 in the key of C major. And then we have A, E, and C, another root position A minor triad. Then we have G, B, G, and D. That is a root position 5 chord, a G major triad. And then we have C, C, G, and E. Root position tonic triad, or C major. It's kind of cool how the bass goes A, G sharp, A, C, A, G natural, C, C. I think that's kind of a cool motive in the bass. We sort of have like A, and then we have A prime, which is interesting because these shorter phrases aren't ones that we commonly come in contact with Bach. Usually the phrases are about 2 measures, maybe a little bit longer than 2 measures in length, or a little shorter than 2 measures in length, but these 2 short phrases are interesting. Alright, moving ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence, and this is probably the coolest cadence in the entire piece. A perfect authentic cadence in the key of A minor again, but we have the Picardy third in the middle of the chorale. What's that doing there? Let's find out. So if we say that we've modulated to the key of A minor right here, just like how we did on the previous phrase, we can say that that's a 3 chord, right? Because C is 3 in the key of A minor. And then we have another C chord because the bass is the only thing that really changes. It leaps up an octave. We have our first non-chord tones in the lower voices. Then we have A, C, C, and E. That is a root position A minor triad, or 1. Passing tones in the lower voices. Then we have F sharp, A, C, and D. Bach uses these 4, 6, 5 chords from time to time, which is really interesting because most of the time they come in this spelling as well, where it's the F sharp is in the bass because we have this raised 6, raised 7, and then tonic motive in the bass, which gives it this spelling. But usually it's paired with G sharp, B, B, and D. We have this passing root position 7 chord, 4, 6, 5, 7. Then we go to A minor, A, C. This D is this B is a suspension, a 9/8 suspension over the bass. So we have A, C, E, or A, E, A, and C. So it's really just a kind of like a squished 4, 7, 1 progression, but it's this this dominant 4 sound because it's a D7 chord over F sharp. That goes to 7 and then to 1. Bach likes that progression a lot. And as we're getting ready for the cadence, we have D, A, or D, F, F natural, A, and B. You know that Bach loves his 2, 6, 5 chords. E, E, G sharp, and B. That's an E major triad in root position. Passing 7th in the tenor. And then we have an anticipation here in the soprano. before we cadence on 1. And remember, it's uppercase 1 because we have a C sharp that makes the chord major. Okay, we cadence on a major chord, like a Picardy third, in the middle of the piece. I think the last time we saw that, and I could be wrong here, but we were analyzing a piece that was clearly in E Phrygian. And that was one of the earlier chorales we did before I even started formatting it on full pieces of paper myself. I was just printing out the document from just from the e-book that I use. So what is this A major chord doing here? Well, if we look ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of D minor, which again has a cadence on D major, that Picardy third, but clearly with the B flats and the C sharps in tandem with one another. This B flat's not just a fluke. We see them in other voices, and it's over multiple measures. We are in the key of D minor for sure. So A minor would be a minor 5, which we talked about at length in the last chorale, but in this chorale, with an A major, it's now the dominant of the key of A minor, and I think that that's a very beautiful thing, because if we cadenced on A minor, this modulation would sound much more direct. If the C sharp was immediately after the C natural, it would have a much different effect in comparison to carrying the C sharp over and this A major being a link between the two keys or the two sound worlds. So that 5 gets carried into the next beat, A, C sharp, A, and E. Again, we have an active lower voice lines with passing tones in both. Then we have C sharp, E, A, and E. That's just a first inversion of the chord. And then we get skips in the lower voices. Again, we get this motive where it goes 1, 2, 3, and then 1 again. And I'm calling it 1, 2, 3, and 1, but really it's just a stepwise line and then a skip back down to where it started, and then that has this effect of taking the chord, putting it in first inversion, and then bringing it back to root position over the span of 2 beats, or over the span of 2 beats. And then we get D, D, A, and F. There's our tonic triad with a passing 7th in the bass, B flat, D, B flat, and F. That is a 6 chord in the key of D minor, a B flat major triad in root position with a passing 7th in the bass. Now we're on to the second system, E, D, B flat, and E. And sorry, this is a G. You know, Bach loves his 2, 6, 5 chords. That is E half diminished, or E minor 7 flat 5 over G. And then that chord on this beat kind of gets turned into root position. And for a root position chord, we would use this figured bass, 7, 5, 3. However, E, D, B flat, and E, it would only really be 7, 5. So that 3 is kind of, that 3 would imply the G was being played in another voice. But no, when you do that on the 8th note here, the and of 1, you're omitting the G. So that 3 might not make its way into the figured bass. I'm actually not 100% sure on that one. But if the figured bass is really a literal instruction, that 3 wouldn't be there for that chord. So you got to be wary of when you're writing figured bass, if anyone still writes figured bass. I don't think it's a very fashionable thing to do anymore, but you got to be familiar with it if you are a performer of music of this period for sure. A, C sharp, A, and E. That is an A major triad in root position, which is a 5 chord in the key of D minor. Passing tone, or even, honestly, the trajectory of this is F sharp, so I look at it like a passing tone, but I guess literally it is an anticipation, because we have this really interesting suspended chord, or I guess it's a sus chord, D, D, G, and D. It's like an open 5th, or I guess an open 4th, but really what's being applied here is another Picardy third cadence. It's just these 2 chords are the 4 and the 2 before we get. It's really the 4 and the 2 before we get the 3. Sorry, an alarm went off on my phone. And then we cadence on 1, of course. And remember this motive because it's going to come back later a couple of times. You might be able to look ahead and already see it. But yes, and Bach loves to do that suspension stuff in the alto. Next, cadence. Perfect authentic cadence in the key of C major. So here, D, when we were going from A minor to D minor, this functioned as our dominant link. But D major isn't diatonic to the key of C major, so what's going on here? Well, I do think a modulation occurs, but we kind of get tricked into thinking we're going to the key of G major. We're definitely in the key of C major, though, just because these F sharps are non-existent beyond this. They're non-existent in the next phrase. So what is D major in the key of C major? It is 5 of 5, because D is the dominant of G and G is the dominant of C. Therefore, it's 5 of 5. And then that immediately goes to 5, as we would expect. G, B, G, and D. And it's doubled the way we would expect to. Passing tones in the lower voices. We see we have a very active lower line, and when the activity stops, it's passed pretty much to the alto, which is interesting. I think there's some, what would it be? Bach was being deliberate. B, D, G, and B. The chord is just turning into first inversion, and again, it goes to root position when the other voices skip down. We really have two phrases that are very similar to one another here. And then we would expect 5 to go to 1, of course. C, C, G, and E. And I say of course because that's what our expectation is, but we know that 5 often goes to 6, and it also often goes to 3, and it can go to 4, 6, it can go to lots of different places, but most of the time it goes to 1. I would hedge my bets and say that 5 most often goes to 1 because, well, we see 5 in cadential contexts a lot, and if 5 isn't going to 1, it's going to one of the, like a tonic substitute like 3, or either A is in the bass or E is in the bass. Then we have A, C, A, and E. Root position A minor triad with a passing 7th in the bass. That's just a 6 chord, A minor, F, C, A, and D. Bach loves his 2-6-5 chords. That chord again, we have D, C, A, and D. Mirrors the exact same structure as before. I remember this 3 is sort of in parentheses because that figured bass, I would just, if I was doing quick analysis, I would just say, if a 7 chord gets turned from first inversion to root position, that's usually what the figured bass would be for a root position 7 chord, because 7 is just shorthand for 7-5-3. But the 3 is not in the chord, which is actually very interesting because diminished triads are defined by their 5th. Of course, the 3rd helps the sound, but it's a byproduct of the diminished triads are named because they are the only triad that have a diminished 5th. Minor triads have a perfect 5th, and that's shared also with a major chord, so you need a 3rd to contextualize it. So this D could be major, this D could be minor, but F is already in our ears from before, so perhaps it's implied. I mean, definitely it's implied, but whether or not you can be more creative with the figure bass is beyond my knowledge of the practice. So G, B, G, and D. There's our 5 chord. We could honestly just use this this previous cadence as our model because they more or less do the same thing. We have the suspended chord. We have the sus4 with the F, the sus2 with the D. He's surrounding the E, which ends up being the chord that he holds with the fermata. All right, moving into the last cadence, we have a perfect authentic cadence, who would have thought, in the key of A minor. But we cadence on A major because Bach often uses the Picardy 3rd to end. Not always, but I'd say more often than not in his chorales. Then we have, okay, so we're still in the, we're going to modulate to the key of A minor. Now we've been in D minor for a while. We went to C major for a bit. Now we're going to go ahead and say that this C chord is now 3 in the key of A minor. So then we have F, A, F, and C. 3 wants to go to 6, which F is in the key of A minor. E, A, F, and D. I think that E is not part of the chord. It's an accented non-chord tone. We have D, A, F, and D. It's a root position D minor triad, which is 4 in the key of A minor. And then we have G sharp, B, E, and E. That's an E major triad over G sharp. It's a 5-6 chord, which turns to 5-3 on the next beat, or the next and rather. And then we have A, E, and D. Kind of the same thing happening here, but instead of in the bass, it's happening in the soprano. This is a root position tonic. It's a tonic triad, A minor, but here we have an accented non-chord tone. So instead of highlighting D minor here, it highlights A minor here. We have D sharp, A, F sharp, and B. I was about to say Bach loves his 2-6-5 chords, but this is not a 2-6-5 chord. This is a B7 chord, so 5-6-5 of 5, because B is the dominant of E and E is the dominant of A minor. This is really just a substitute. If you turn that into D natural, you have a 2-6-5 chord. E, G sharp, E, and B with a passing 7th in the alto, or it's like I said, it's basically a passing 7th, but literally it's an anticipation. So it's just a 5 chord, an E major triad in root position. And then we cadence on 1. The cool thing is that we don't know the quality of the triad until the C sharp gets introduced. So it's this very beautiful gesture in the alto, which I really like. And he carries that gesture all the way through the second system. So the last 3 phrases of the chorale are all, you sort of have this qualityless triad that doesn't get revealed until the next beat. And I think that's really neat. But all in all, the chorale was medium easy to analyze. None of the chords were really a stretch. So I feel like harmonically I'm going to tuck this one into my back pocket definitely for formal analysis, because the form of this chorale is very clear. We have some sections that we could identify as A, and then we sort of have like a beat around that out. Then we have B sections that are, we have like the first iteration, the second iteration, and the third iteration that are all related to one another, which is interesting. So it's sort of like I wouldn't even, maybe this is a binary form. I don't know. I'd have to look at it a little bit deeper, but the form at the phrase level is very straightforward, I would say. And the chords are very easy to analyze. We explore 3 different keys at various times, and yeah, lots of really positive takeaways from this chorale. And it was fairly easy to analyze. This would be a really great chorale for students who are learning about modulation for the first time. Great. So that was today's analysis. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's analysis. And thank you for watching the video and supporting the channel. I hope you take care.